Willie Handler is back to tell us how to rewire our nervous system in 30 days. He is the author of Out from the Shadows. So it uncovers how his parents' experiences as Holocaust survivors shaped his own emotional patterns. And so he has learned through experience how to do exactly that. How do we rewire our nervous system from fight or flight into chill zone, into the calm zone? And Willie is here to tell us all of the secrets and how to do that. Willie, it's good to see you. It's January 5th. You're the first recording after the new year, and I'm excited. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. I had a great month of December where, unlike everybody else who got all stressed out, I kind of just chilled for a month. It was great.
That fits perfectly with the topic today.
It does.
So, we talk about fight or flight, but for the audience, what does that mean? What is fight or flight? And why do so
So,
many men specifically live in fight or flight without really even realizing it?
so I mean, stress is kind of like a mental is like it's a natural response to life experiences. And it and in the short term, it's like a survival mechanism. So when you're faced with a situation, and in some cases that situation could even be dangerous. But often it's not. But you either your body responds and either puts you in fight or fight res mode, and either you're there to battle whatever or you skedaddle. But what happens is the your body reacts the same whether you fight or you run away. And so your hypothalamus sort of triggers your adrenal gland, and that releases two kinds of hormones. One is adrenaline, which everybody is familiar with, but the other one is cortisol. Adrenaline increases your heart rate, raises your blood pressure, and kind of like boosts your energy, and which prepares you to fight or flight. And at the same time, cortisol increases, I guess, it increases glucose in your bloodstream, and but it also suppresses other functions in your body. And so it's great. It's a great response in the short term. But in the long term, if you're always stressed, and we call that chronic stress, it has
Mhm.
actually negative impacts on your body. And so you're like, you can't have raised blood pressure long term. That is not that is not going to be healthy. And I think most people understand that. Um, and so that puts you at risk for hypertension, heart attack, strokes, not, serious stuff.
Yeah.
Also, it affects your digestive system because when you're in fight or flight mode, your body sort of kind of abandons your digestive system because it's not as much of a priority. But when it becomes chronic, it you could end up with acid reflux, heartburn, diarrhea, stuff like that. And I think people when they're stressed or stuff like that, I think they can relate to that. They've experienced that. But also long-term cortisol exposure, it weakens your immune system. Next thing you know, you're getting sick more often,
Right.
especially like flus and viruses and stuff like that. And also it affects your your muscles, for instance, because they stay in a state of tension because you're in fight or flight mode, and so you end up with neck pain, chronic headaches, back pain, things like that. Also, This is like almost like a long shopping list, right? But it actually that's the I think that's the point is it actually impacts on so many parts of your body. So even your respiratory system, you tend to hyperventilate, you have shortness of breath. People will have asthma attacks because again, it activates, will activate your asthma. And in some people, and I, I've experienced panic attacks. So these are all very bad things. In fact, it even impacts on your reproductive system. So
Wow.
for men, their testosterone level will drop off.
Mm.
And even for women, um, it will it will cause sort of irregular, unpredictable menstrual cycles. And other things like eczema, psoriasis, um, worse acne and things like that. So it really is a long, long, long list of things. And that's just the physical ones. That's not even the mental ones.
That's scary. And it's scarier to think that most people don't even realize that their body is stuck in fight or flight because they're just so used to living in that level of stress that most people that I speak to, they're like, oh, I don't feel hungry. I'm never hungry, but they don't know why. But from the outside, I can see that their life is pretty chaotic. So it's pretty easy for me to see why they might be feeling that way, but they don't realize it. So why don't people realize that they're stuck in fight or flight? And what are the most common signs that a man's nervous system is overloaded?
Well, I think you don't notice it uh, because you're not listening to your body. I think that's the main reason. So so the symptoms have to become, the signs or symptoms that they have to become to the point where it can no longer be ignored, but they're there. You just ignore them. I remember when I left work on a full-time basis and sort of went off on my own. Um, it took me. I was in a I was in a chronic state of stress, and I noticed when I stopped working, I would still get up. Get up early, and I was ready to go. And it took me 3 to 4 months to get out of that,
Mhm.
and to actually my body started to relax. And so I didn't even. I thought I had no stress. I had tons of stress, but you'd never bothered listening to your body. Um, and so I think that was. And so, what are the signs that you're most looking for people most looking for? Um, I think it is things like um, sort of anxiety disorders or depression. Those are signs. Memory problems, difficulty concentrating, um, problem sleeping.
That's a
Uh,
big one. The sleep is a
Huge,
big one.
huge, huge. You know, last night, last night, in fact, it took me an hour and a half to fall asleep. Why,
Mm.
Willie, would it take you an hour and a half to fall asleep? Because there was this issue that was on my mind that I just wouldn't let go.
Right.
And so so you can imagine if you got a million things on your plate at work and you're taking it home and you're trying to go to sleep at night and it's not working for you. So that's a huge one. But I think, headaches are a trigger sign, but blood pressure, you know,
Yes.
high blood pressure is really a silent killer. And I think a lot of people kind of just poo-poo it, but your doctor can give you medication, but what's the source of your um, hypertension. Is it your sedentary life? Maybe. Maybe you're a smoker, sure, but when I came down with it, and part of it is hereditary as well, but I was a long distance runner. That's what I used that's what I used to use to reduce my stress. Is I would let it out in a nice long run. I would run 4 times a week or something like that. And I still had, and I still had blood pressure. So there is an instance where probably it was maybe partly lifestyle and because of the life I was living, but partly hereditary as well. But these are all kind of like signs that you really need to take a look at your life and what you're doing. And
Yeah.
so that, there are changes that you can do, which is like, because some people, when they're stressed, they overeat or they undereat, right? And so you have to eliminate both, which is you do healthy eating, um, avoid alcohol, tobacco, drugs as a coping mechanism, and
Yeah, that just
especially,
makes things worse, essentially. And
yeah.
I think before we move on to all the benefits or what we can do to help the nervous system, first of all, sleep is like the number one most important thing. And if your sleep is interrupted, that means that your body doesn't have the ability to repair itself and to release stress overnight. And that keeps you in that constant state of like clenching. That's what I'm picturing and feeling when we're talking about this is like when I was stuck in fight or flight, it was like my body was just like clenched all the time and I wasn't able to relax. And not only
Mhm.
did that wreak havoc in my life, it also caused my body to start shutting down. And I'm a really healthy person. So I was eating well, exercising, had a very balanced life, but I was so stressed. And so even though I was doing all of the things that usually would help with lowering stress, the major things were causing stress and my body wasn't able to relax. So you talk about on rewiring the nervous system in 30 days. So is that actually possible? And can you give us some idea on how to even begin and what to do and what that would look like?
I will. And I just want to add one thing because, and we were talking about this before we went live, which is that on Friday I had a vaccine and I had a really massive immune response, which is a good thing, but feels horrible. And I
Right,
literally slept for 20 hours. And
right,
I have a Garmin um, watch, which actually measures your stress level. And even though I slept for most of 20 hours, I had sky high stress because it wasn't restful sleep. So,
right.
like, not every sleep is the same. And so, and that's part of it. I was, because I was having chills and fevers and stuff like that. And it was not it was not what I would call a restorative sleep, but my body needed it anyway. So that not every kind, I just wanted to point out that not every kind of sleep is, um, is, is a positive thing. So yes, back to your question, do you can rewire your nervous system in 30 days. And there are proven sort of formulas on how to do it, and it's not difficult at all. It all it requires is a certain amount of discipline.
So what does that look like?
Okay, so I think it's really like in 3 steps, and
Right. So
I'd
30
say
days is
like
a month.
about.
And so that's, yeah, that's aggressive to me, but you have the way. So I'm excited for you to tell us.
Okay, so this is my approach, and I can tell you not, and this is not the only approach. And
Mm.
so it's not like one size fits all. It's got to work for you. But the first step is learning how to use your body to calm yourself down. So
Hmm.
it's kind of like breathing exercises and where you sort of like inhale through your nose, you'll for 4 or 5 seconds, then you hold it in for about 7 seconds, and then you exhale through your mouth. And you do this five for 5 minutes twice a day. That's only 10 minutes a day. And what that does is it signals to your brain to lower your cortisol levels. It's telling your brain that fight or flight situation is no longer there. The other part of it is, which is grounding, which I've been taught by my therapist, and that involves anchoring yourself to the present your present world, which is not thinking about all that other stuff that's killing you. And what I do is I just go for a 15-minute walk and sort
Mm.
of and you can do it you can do stuff at your desk and just sort of ground yourself. You have your feet on your desk. No, but I recommend is just stepping outside for 15 minutes and just appreciating what's around you. Because what you're doing is focusing on other things than what is stressing you. And that will
Right.
also calm you down. And um and and those two things, if you do it each day, will slowly start to relax your body a bit and prepare you for the next step. And the next step is you have to build new neural pathways because you don't want to go back to what you were doing. And that's when it gets a little bit more complicated.
So one thing you said was, during that box breathing that you talk about, and I love breath work so much. It totally calms the body down. We should have learned that in school. When you're at school, they should teach you how to use your breath to calm your body. But it's really interesting because most of us are worried about the future or stuck in the past. And it's really, really hard to stay in the moment. So when you started to utilize breath work and walking, did it ground you back into the present moment?
It did. It really, really did. Um,
I think
I
that's
could,
really important. I think most
I,
people are, like I said, worried about money and their kids and everything. It's really, really difficult to stay present.
so those things don't go away.
Hmm.
But what you're doing is relaxing your body and actually put you in a better frame of mind to address issues.
Right.
Because remember, fight or flight is for urgent, urgent action. But those other things aren't urgent action. And so what you want to do is put yourself in a better place to actually deal with them.
Yeah, for sure. So you talk about box breathing, going for walks. What are other things that are going to help rewire the nervous system in 30 days? And do you have to do these things every single day?
Yeah, well, here's another good. Here's a here's one where it probably it won't surprise people, but cold exposure, like splashing cold, well, actually taking a cold shower. Wow, that will put you in the moment. It really will have an impact on your nervous system, and it's almost like a shock to the system, but it's a positive one.
Right.
You only have to step into that shower for a minute or two, and you will feel totally different when you step out.
Yeah,
And again,
I have a hard time with that one.
like I hate cold showers, but let me tell you, you it it really does grab your nervous system and it brings you into the moment. And that's what you're doing in the first phase. The other stuff is the next phases are really a little bit more complicated, but that first phase is easy. It's just take, as I said, it just takes a little bit of discipline. Cold
Right.
shower a day, and you'll be dead in 10 days, I think. No, I mean, or even like go for a swim. That's because pools aren't exactly, well, if it's not a really warm pool. But like going for a swim will do it as well. And it's good because it's also exercise and activity. And again, that's kind of like taking a walk even. So it will bring you into the moment.
Do you think consistency is more important than intensity when it comes to these things?
I think so, yeah, because um, what you're trying to do is retrain your nervous system so you can't take how much you do isn't as important as you keep doing it because once there's gaps in that process, you kind of start to drift back to where you were.
Yeah, exactly. I think most people like small, impactful things every single day, moving the needle just 1%. If you do that every single day and you do something for your body every single day that takes you out of that fight or flight mode, that adds up. 1% every day after 3 months, after 30 days, like we're talking about today, it adds up. That's 30%. So, what about relationships? Once the nervous system starts regulating, how does that change the way men show up in relationships?
And that's a great question, which my wife still doesn't understand. Because when I went through it, it kind of enhanced my relationship. I felt more in touch with my spouse, and she kind of I think the first reaction was, is he being sincere or is this just
What does he want?
she like what's going on? So yeah, it was just a natural progression where when you start noticing your surroundings, you're going, hey, who's that nice who's that nice lady on the sofa next to me?
She's been there for so long,
No,
but
and
my
I'm being
nervous system's
facetious, but
regulated.
I'm being facetious, but it's actually true that you suddenly become, when you're more in the moment, you're focused on your surroundings, and that includes your family, your spouse, your kids, and things like that. So yeah, I think it would have a positive impact.
Why do you think emotional availability increases when the body feels safe? And this is important because men these days are more in touch with their emotions than they ever have been. And it's becoming normalized for men to express their emotions and heal in that way. So when your body is in the rest, reset mode, why does the emotional availability increase?
Well, when you say more, let's not overstate it. It's not much more, but more than in the past. But myself included. Um, I think it all comes back to the fight or flight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that when when there's a stressful event, um, survival is the priority,
Mm.
right? And so um, making yourself emotionally available is not part of survival mode. And
Right.
so,
Imagine an animal being hunted by a cougar. They're not going to be able to connect with their spouse in that moment because they're going to be like looking around and checking to see, looking over their shoulder. They're going to be tense. They're going to be worried about everything. So that's what I imagine when someone is stuck in fight or flight is they don't have the ability to connect because they're so intensely focused on everything but like all of the bad, right? All those negative feelings that fight or flight causes. And they're not negative per se, but when they're constant and like we're talking about today, when the body is stuck that way, that's really, really hard on the system.
yeah, no, and so the funny thing is that for many, many people, particularly men, but not just men, you're in constant survival mode. It impacts like as I when I began, it impacts on everything. But you're really not in your brain is in survival mode, but you're not your life is not being threatened. And so it's you've basically overactivated your brain, and it stays in that state for far too long.
So when the nervous system starts to rewire, what changes do men typically notice first?
Um, I think I think when you notice your sleep patterns improve,
Hmm.
you've made good progress because there's barely an adult that doesn't complain about issues around sleep. And I think you've gotten somewhere where you wake up refreshed and you don't need to reach for that cup of coffee, though you do anyways because you're addicted. But you don't need it to feel refreshed.
Hmm.
You wake up that way. I think when you feel better, able to focus on things, um, and I would say, what else would I? I think for me, those are the most of the most important things is your ability to focus. And you and get refreshing sleep and good sleep impacts on all those things in a positive way that stress impacts in a negative way, such as such as your digestive system and your nervous system and your immune system and your cardiovascular system, all those things in a positive way. So it's not that you use sleep to counter stress, but rather um, as you're able to reduce your stress levels, it has a positive impact on your restorative functions.
Right.
Because there's nothing restorative about stress.
No, not at all.
And you'll
Not at
feel
all.
less anxious about things. So mentally, you'll feel better. So you won't be as anxious. You may not get depressed as much and things like that. So these are things that you can do on your own.
So, what about the biggest myth that men believe about stress, strength, or emotional regulation? What do you think the biggest myths are that men believe about those things?
I got this. I think that's it. I got this.
Yeah.
I've said it.
Men are like supposed to be strong, right? Like
Right.
they're
So
supposed to be tough. Like God forbid they show any emotion and they're supposed to be the tough ones. I had a friend of mine get emotional and then say, I'm so sorry. Is this making you uncomfortable? I know men aren't really supposed to show their emotion. And I had to set him straight. I was like, I think this is amazing that you're so in touch with yourself and you can allow yourself to show emotion, especially in a public place. Like I think too many men are stuck in this toxic masculinity where they feel like they need to be so strong. And yeah, I've got this. I like how you said
But
that.
and
I've got
so
this.
and you know this stoic approach that you nothing you know that you're Teflon, everything you know nothing sticks to you, everything bounces off of you. It's a myth. It's a myth. Your
Yeah,
body absorbs it all, and you just hold it inside,
right.
and you self-destruct.
Yeah. So, what about the men out there who are like, oh, what if I slow down and it makes me weaker? What would you say to those men?
Weaker. Nonsense. You'll be more productive.
Hmm.
More productive is you'll be more and when I say productive, I mean you'll be more effective because you're making decisions more clear-minded and a better place mentally. Um, and you'll be able to focus, but there are only benefits. There's no downside. Those downsides uh, are are myths, and they're not proven by science. And I know a lot of guys, you know, they kind of rely on science. Well, this is all science, and there's nothing positive about being stoic. It's really a self-destructive approach to dealing with problems.
Yeah. So, tell us about your experience with your nervous system regulation and how that was for you, because you went through a lot in your life. You wrote this beautiful book that's on my shelf, Out from the Shadows. Um, your parents were Holocaust survivors. So not only did you you were born into fight or flight, it was like you were born into fight or flight. And so when did you realize that you were in fight or flight, and how did you start to relieve your own stress?
Well, um, it's I'm embarrassed to say was probably just in the last 5 years. And
No, that's fair. I think, like I
um,
said, you were born into it, and so it just felt
yeah.
like your everyday life.
So even when and I mentioned earlier that I when I stopped working full time, you know I realized how I that was the first time I realized I had stress.
Right.
People saw me at work and people would be freaking out about stuff. And I'm going, we'll just get it done, whatever. And um, I was just that stereotype stoic, just hold it all in. And gee, and did a good job calming people around me, but didn't calm me.
Right.
But I fooled myself into thinking I was like calm, but I was not calm. And I saw that when I retired, and then realized I couldn't like sit still and read a book, or you know, I was in a fight or flight mode. And so I think that I was part way there. And then but I wasn't it was only part way. And then 5 years ago when I started writing that book, that's next to Lisa's head, from my perspective. Um, I suddenly realized I saw the connection between the trauma I've been exposed to through my family and all that stress. Because um, trauma actually has a real, directly correlates with stress because I was born in survival mode. I live
Yeah.
my life in survival mode. And in survival mode is chronic stress. And so that's when I realized I needed to do something more, I needed to act on it. and I didn't know how to, so I actually went into therapy, which is one of the options, but not it's not necessary, but it was for me. And then I went on and followed up with that book that I wrote with another one that I'm actually nearing completion, which is interviewed over 100 other people who had inherited um, trauma from family and began to say to take notes of how it impacted on them. And it's a future book that will be coming out. So I've learned a lot about how trauma impacts on your body. And these people, I was very fortunate. They opened up to me, and I learned a lot. And that actually also helped me. It also triggered me because listening to these stories was not exactly a positive experience, but it certainly, um, I didn't do it it wasn't, the intention wasn't to help myself, but to help others, but it also helped myself along the way. Though I don't recommend that you follow this piece, but there are things that you can do on your own, and where you can't, you can reach out to a therapist or even someone like Lisa. Not that I'm not that I'm on here to plug Lisa, but Lisa does does have the skill sets to help people um, learn to rewire their nervous system. And so if you need help, there are people around
There
who
are
can
people around.
help you achieve that. And 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 you'll never regret it. You'll feel so much better.
Yeah, I agree. So just to summarize before we go for the day, if someone feels constantly on edge, where would the first few things, what are the first few things someone can do in order to start calming their body and nervous system down?
The first thing, just just to do that, you know, that that deep breathing and relaxation. Wow. Even that alone, you do that for 5 minutes twice a day, and you will feel it. You'll feel it. You do it when it feels right for you, but just you do it.
Hmm.
And in fact, you could do it the rest of your life. It's not going to hurt you. And or every time you feel some tension or stress building up, why not? Why not catch it while it's starting to build, rather than when you're in a much higher state. So that's the probably the simplest thing you can just do yourself. Or go for a walk for 15 minutes. That's also pretty easy to do. Though I wouldn't I'm sitting in Toronto right now in the middle of a snowstorm. Today's not that day to go for a walk.
Even walking around your apartment or your house and
Yeah, you can go to the
moving
mall.
around.
Go
Yeah.
to the mall, or if you're working in a downtown core and there's an underground, shopping area, you go down there. You get out of the office. Don't eat your lunch in the office. Get out of the office, walk around, look around, and just absorb what you see around you and forget about what's up on your desk.
Mm. Thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your story and for giving us tips on how to rewire our nervous system in 30 days.
Um, my pleasure. Um, and thank you. So, looking forward to our next couple of episodes. And it's been this has been like a very positive experience as well, because it's forced me to sort of think um, about trauma in a quite different way, which is more in a restorative or curative fashion, rather than sort of the downside of it.
Right. I love that. And I think you have it down pat. And what I learned from listening to you today is the importance of the little things and how consistency matters more than aggressively. So, in order to really start to rewire and to calm our bodies down, developing small habits like breathing for 5 minutes twice a day is going to make a hell of a difference. And I think the misconception is that big changes require big changes, but that's not always the case. So, if any of you are out there and you're struggling and you're stuck in fight or flight, take 10 minutes a day and start practicing these small little habits that eventually will start to add up and help you have a better sleep at night. Stay tuned for an amazing year. Happy New Year, everybody. 2026. I wish everyone such an amazing year. And Willie, we look forward to having you back to talk more about all of these amazing, really impactful topics that conversations aren't easy, but the impact is huge.
Thank you, and a happy new year to everyone who's be listening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.